8-year-old boy calls police after hearing strange noises from his stepfather's bedroom, where his twin sister has been locked for hours. When officers break down the door, no one is prepared for what they find. The emergency room of Bridgeport General Hospital buzzed with its usual Friday night chaos as Claire Hoover finished updating her last patient's chart. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed, fatigue seeping into every movement after 18 hours into her shift. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under her eyes, highlighting the toll of too many double shifts and sleepless nights. "Claire, honey, you look dead on your feet," Martha, the charge nurse, called from the station. "When was the last time you took a day off?" Claire managed a weak smile, her auburn hair falling loose from its once neat bun. "Can't remember," she admitted, closing the patient file. But Sean's still looking for work, and with the twin school expenses, she let the sentence trail off, the weight of financial responsibility evident in her slumped shoulders. "Speaking of the little ones, how are Tommy and Sarah doing?" Martha asked, her experienced eyes noting the flash of something. Worry? Uncertainty? That crossed Claire's face before she could mask it. "They're adjusting," Claire replied carefully. "You know how kids can be with stepfathers. It just takes time. It had been 2 years since she'd met Sean Walsh in this very emergency room. He'd come in with a nasty workplace injury. A steel beam had fallen on his foot at the construction site. Claire remembered how his charm had cut through her exhaustion that night, how his blue eyes had crinkled when he smiled through his pain. He'd asked for her number before she'd finished bandaging his foot. The whirlwind romance that followed felt like a lifetime ago. Sean had been different then, employed, confident, full of promises about the future he'd build for them. Now, 14 months after losing his job in a company-wide layoff, he spent his days at home with the twins, while Claire worked increasingly longer shifts to keep them afloat. The drive home that evening was a blur of streetlights and worry. Claire's mind wandered to the growing stack of bills on the kitchen counter, the tension that seemed to fill their small house like smoke, and the subtle changes she'd noticed in her children but was too exhausted to properly address. The house was dark when she pulled into the driveway, save for the blue flicker of the television through the living room window. The clock on her dashboard read 11:42 p.m. Claire gathered her purse and the grocery bag containing the cheap TV dinners she'd grabbed on her way home. Another meal she wouldn't be able to share with her family. The front door creaked as she entered, and the smell of stale beer hit her immediately. Sean was sprawled on the couch, empty bottles littering the coffee table. The TV cast shadows across his unshaven face, once handsome features now puffy from drink and inactivity. "You're late," he muttered without opening his eyes. "Emergency came in right at shift change," Claire explained softly, trying not to wake the twins. "How were the kids today?" "Fine." Sean's response was clipped. "Sarah gave me some attitude about doing her homework. Had to teach her some respect." Claire's hand tightened on the grocery bag. "What do you mean, teach her respect?" "Just sent her to her room without dinner." "Don't worry about it." He shifted on the couch, turning his back to her. "There's no more beer, by the way. Need you to pick some up tomorrow." Claire stood in the darkness of her kitchen, putting away the TV dinners with mechanical movements. The house felt different now, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what had changed. The happy photos on the refrigerator, Sean with the twins at the beach last summer, their first Christmas as a family, seemed to mock her with their frozen smiles. Upstairs, she peered into the twins' rooms. Tommy was asleep, one arm wrapped around his favorite Captain America action figure. In the soft glow of his nightlight, he looked younger than his 8 years. Claire's heart ached with love and guilt. She barely saw him awake anymore. Sarah's room was next. Unlike her brother, Sarah wasn't asleep. She lay rigid under her covers, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. "Sweetheart," Claire whispered. "Everything okay?" Sarah didn't look at her. "I'm fine, Mommy. Just not tired." Claire crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. In the dim light, she thought she saw something dark on Sarah's arm, just below her pajama sleeve. But when she reached to touch it, Sarah flinched away. "Did something happen today?" Claire asked, that nagging worry growing stronger. No, Sarah answered too quickly. I was bad about my homework. That's all. I'm sorry. Claire leaned down to kiss her daughter's forehead, noting how Sarah held her breath until she pulled away. Try to get some sleep, baby. I love you. Love you too, Mommy. Back in the hallway, Claire paused. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. But her mind was foggy with exhaustion, and she had another shift in less than 8 hours. She told herself she'd talk to the kids properly on her next day off. Really sit down and figure out what was bothering them. In the master bedroom, Claire changed into her nightgown, careful not to wake Sean, who had stumbled up to bed while she was checking on the twins. As she set her alarm for another early start, she caught her reflection in the mirror. A ghost of the woman she'd been 2 years ago, when she'd believed in perfect families and second chances. The last thing she heard before drifting off was a soft sound from across the hall. It might have been crying or perhaps just the wind. In her exhaustion, Claire couldn't tell the difference anymore. She didn't know it then, but in exactly 13 days, her son would make a phone call that would shatter their carefully constructed facade of normalcy. And the perfect family she'd sacrificed everything to build would crumble like a house of cards in a storm. Tommy Hoover sat at the top of the stairs, his small hands wrapped around the wooden banister, listening to the sounds drifting up from the kitchen. The crash of another empty beer bottle hitting the trash can. Sean's heavy footsteps. Sarah's quiet sobs. His sister had spilled orange juice at breakfast. Such a small thing, but in their house, small things had become dangerous. Just like her, Sean had muttered, staring at Sarah with that strange look he got sometimes. Clumsy and stupid, just like Rebecca. Tommy didn't know who Rebecca was, but he knew that name made Sean angry. He'd started saying it more often lately, especially when he looked at Sarah. The kitchen fell silent. Too silent. Tommy crept down a few steps, staying in the shadows like the spy in his favorite books. Sarah stood frozen by the sink, orange juice still dripping from the counter. Sean loomed over her, swaying slightly, morning sunlight glinting off the empty bottle in his hand. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. I'll clean it up. Sorry doesn't fix things, does it? Sean's voice had that scary softness to it. Doesn't change what you are. Tommy watched his sister shrink into herself, becoming smaller and smaller. She'd been doing that a lot lately, disappearing even while standing still. Her long dark hair fell forward, hiding her face, but Tommy could see her trembling. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Sean grabbed Sarah's arm, yanking her around. The empty bottle clattered to the floor but didn't break. You think you're better than me? Think you can just ignore me in my own house? No, Sarah's voice cracked. Please, I don't. The sound of flesh meeting flesh echoed through the kitchen. Tommy bit his lip so hard he tasted blood, forcing himself to stay quiet, to stay hidden. Sarah didn't make a sound as she crumpled to the floor, her small hand covering her cheek. Clean up this mess, Sean growled, stepping over her. And don't let your mother see that mark. You know how she worries. Tommy retreated upstairs as Sean's footsteps approached, ducking into the bathroom. His heart pounded so hard he was sure it would burst. When he heard Sean's bedroom door slam, he crept back to the kitchen. Sarah was on her hands and knees, wiping up juice with paper towels. Her dark hair still covered her face, but Tommy could see the angry red handprint blooming on her cheek. Sarah, he whispered, using his special nickname for her. Let me help. She flinched at his voice, then relaxed slightly when she saw it was him. You should go back upstairs, Tommy. He might come back. I'm not leaving you. Tommy grabbed more paper towels and knelt beside his sister. Under her hair, tears tracked silently down her face. We should tell Mom. Sarah shook her head violently. We can't. He said he'd hurt her too if we told. And she works so hard. She's so tired all the time. Tommy wanted to argue, but he knew Sarah was right. Their mother was barely home anymore, taking extra shifts to make up for Sean's lost income. When she was home, she slept like the dead, dark circles under her eyes making her look like a ghost. As they cleaned, Tommy noticed more bruises on Sarah's arms, purple-yellow marks in the shape of fingerprints. She pulled down her sleeves when she caught him looking. It's not that bad, she mumbled. I just need to be more careful. This isn't right, Sarah. Tommy's voice shook. The stuff he does. The things he says. Shoo! Sarah's eyes darted fearfully toward the stairs. Please, Tommy. Just forget it. But Tommy couldn't forget. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, he snuck into Sean's study. A room they weren't supposed to enter. He didn't know what he was looking for until he found it. A small wooden box hidden behind some books. Inside was an old photograph, creased and worn at the edges. A woman with long dark hair smiled at the camera, her features startlingly similar to Sarah's. On the back, in faded ink, Rebecca Stevens, Summer '02. The sound of footsteps in the hall sent Tommy scrambling to replace the box. He made it out just as Sean rounded the corner, reeking of beer. What are you doing up? Sean demanded. Bathroom, Tommy lied, his heart racing. Just going back to bed. Sean grabbed his arm as he tried to pass. You weren't in my study? Were you, boy? No, sir. Tommy forced himself to meet Sean's bloodshot eyes, remembering what his sister had said about making eye contact. Sean studied him for a long moment, his grip painfully tight. Good. Because you know what happens to nosy little brats who don't mind their own business. Don't you? Tommy nodded, thinking of Sarah's bruises. Yes, sir. Get to bed. Sean shoved him toward his room. And Tommy, keep your door closed tonight. Your sister needs another lesson in respect. Tommy lay awake for hours, listening to the muffled sounds from Sarah's room. His Captain America action figure clutched to his chest. He wished desperately for real superheroes. Someone strong enough to save them, brave enough to stop Sean. But no heroes came that night or any night after. And as Tommy drifted into uneasy sleep, he realized with crushing certainty that in their house, there were no heroes coming to save them. If Sarah was going to be saved, he would have to find the courage to do it himself. He just didn't know how. Not yet. The basement of their Bridgeport home had always been Sean's domain. A cluttered space filled with abandoned job applications and empty bottles. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while Sean was passed out upstairs, Tommy crept down the creaking stairs, drawn by an obsession with the mysterious Rebecca from the photograph. The musty air clung to his skin as he navigated through the maze of cardboard boxes. Most contained Sean's old life, construction gear, work boots caked with dried mud, certificates from training programs he'd never completed. But in the far corner, partially hidden behind a broken lawnmower, Tommy found what he was looking for. A plastic storage bin labeled personal. His hands trembled as he lifted the lid. The photograph he'd discovered in the study wasn't the only one. Dozens of pictures of Rebecca Stevens spilled across the years. Rebecca at what looked like a construction office. Rebecca walking down a street. Rebecca laughing with friends. Some seemed to have been taken without her knowledge. Beneath the photos lay a stack of papers. Old letters, newspaper clippings, and a leather-bound journal. Tommy opened it, his 8-year-old eyes struggling with Sean's messy handwriting. Rebecca came to the site again today. Acted like she didn't even see me. Think she's better than everyone else just because she's the project manager's daughter. One day she'll notice me. One day she'll understand. The entries grew darker as Tommy turned the pages. She's getting married. To that architect from Boston. She had the nerve to invite me to the wedding. Like I want to watch her ruin her life with that paper pusher. She'll regret this. They all regret it eventually. A noise upstairs made Tommy freeze. He quickly replaced everything except one photo that had slipped under a box. As he retrieved it, the date on the back caught his eye. Rebecca's wedding day, 2003, but this photo was different. Rebecca's face had been scratched out with such violence that the paper had torn. Footsteps creaked overhead. Tommy shoved the photo in his pocket and rushed to return the bin to its place. He made it upstairs just as Sean's heavy footfalls started down the hall. That evening, as Claire prepared for another night shift, Tommy watched Sarah setting the table for dinner. In the fading daylight, the resemblance to Rebecca was startling. The same dark hair, the same delicate features. Even the way she moved, careful and quiet, seemed to mirror the woman in the photographs. Sarah, Sean's voice cut through Tommy's thoughts. He stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at Sarah with that familiar, unsettling gaze. "You need to tie your hair back. I don't like it hanging in your face like that." Sarah's hands flew to her hair, trembling. "Mom just brushed it. I said tie it back." Sean's fist crashed against the doorframe. "You think you can defy me? Just like she did." "Sean," Claire appeared behind him, already in her scrubs. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Sean's voice shifted, smoothing into false calm. "Sarah's just being difficult about her hair. I'll handle it." Claire looked uncertainly between them. "I have to go. My shift starts in 30 minutes. Tommy, help your sister with her hair." "Okay?" Tommy nodded, watching helplessly as their mother grabbed her keys and rushed out. The moment her car pulled away, Sean grabbed Sarah's arm. "You think you're so perfect," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "Think you can manipulate everyone with that innocent act?" Rebecca thought that too. "I'm not Rebecca," Sarah whimpered. "I'm just Sarah." "Shut up." Sean shook her violently. "Don't you dare say her name." Tommy stood frozen, the photo burning in his pocket like a secret too heavy to carry. He watched as Sean dragged Sarah upstairs, her feet stumbling on each step. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the house, followed by the first muffled cry. In his room, Tommy pulled out the photo of Rebecca with her scratched-out face. He could hear Sarah sobbing through the wall, could hear Sean's voice rising and falling in a familiar pattern of rage and cruel satisfaction. Carefully, he tucked the photo into his Captain America comic book. Evidence of a truth he didn't fully understand but knew was important. Hours later, when the house had grown quiet, Tommy crept into Sarah's room. She lay curled on her bed, her dark hair now tied back severely, revealing fresh bruises along her jawline. "Sarah," he whispered. "Who's Rebecca?" Sarah turned to face him, her eyes hollow in the darkness. "Someone who got away," she whispered back. "Someone he couldn't hurt. So he hurts me instead." Tommy climbed onto the bed, careful not to touch her injuries. "We need to tell Mom. She won't believe us. She needs him, Tommy. Without his disability checks." Sarah's voice cracked. "Besides, he'll hurt her too. You know he will." Tommy thought of the scratched-out photo, of the obsession documented in that basement journal. He thought of Rebecca Stevens, who had escaped, and his sister Sarah, who had become the target of a madman's displaced rage. "Someone has to stop him," Tommy said, more to himself than to Sarah. "No one can," Sarah replied, turning back to face the wall. "No one even sees." But Tommy saw, and in that moment, watching his twin sister shake with silent sobs, he made a decision. He didn't know how or when, but he would find a way to save her. Even if it meant becoming the hero no one else had been brave enough to be. The rain continued to fall outside their window, washing away another day of secrets in the house that had become their prison. In the darkness, Tommy held his sister's hand until she fell into uneasy sleep, his young mind already forming plans, seeking courage in the face of monsters all too real. Sunday, October 15th dawned gray and cold in Bridgeport. Claire's ancient Toyota backed out of the driveway at 5:45 a.m., its headlights cutting through the morning mist. Another 24-hour shift at the ER awaited her. From his bedroom window, Tommy watched the red taillights disappear around the corner, a familiar knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "She'll be back tomorrow morning," he whispered to himself, clutching his Captain America figure. But tomorrow morning felt like a lifetime away. The house creaked and settled into its morning silence. Tommy could hear Sean's heavy snoring from the master bedroom. He'd passed out around midnight after finishing a 12-pack. The alcohol never lasted as long these days. Sarah was already awake when Tommy peeked into her room. She sat on the edge of her bed, methodically brushing her hair and securing it in a tight ponytail. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, making sure no strand was out of place. One wrong detail could set Sean off. "Want breakfast?" Tommy asked softly. Sarah shook her head. Not hungry, but Tommy knew better. She'd skipped dinner last night too, after Sean had caught her looking at an old family photo album. "The way you stare at pictures," he'd snarled. "Just like her. Always judging, always thinking you're better than everyone else." By 10 a.m., The inevitable sounds of Sean's stirring reached them. The twins sat rigid at the kitchen table, homework spread out before them, a shield of normalcy. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs, followed by the familiar crack of a fresh beer can opening. "Where's the aspirin?" Sean's voice was rough with hangover. "Bathroom cabinet," Tommy answered, not looking up from his math problems. "Did I ask you?" Sean snapped. "Can't even get a straight answer in my own house." Sarah's pencil trembled against her paper. Tommy watched from the corner of his eye as Sean walked past her, his hand deliberately catching her ponytail and yanking it. "Still not tight enough," he muttered. "Trying to look like her on purpose, aren't you?" "No," Sarah whispered. "I'm not." The sound of the beer can crushing in Sean's fist made both children jump. "What did I say about talking back?" The morning deteriorated from there. Sean paced between the kitchen and living room, each beer making him darker, more volatile. By early afternoon, he was deep into his memories, ranting about Rebecca Stevens and her betrayal. "Thought she was too good for me," he slurred, gesturing with his sixth, or was it seventh, beer. "Just like you, little girl. Same stuck-up attitude. Same way of looking at people." Sarah kept her eyes fixed on her homework, but Tommy could see tears dropping onto her math worksheet. At 3:47 p.m., everything shattered. Sarah was clearing away her schoolbooks when one slipped from her hands, thumping against the floor. The sound seemed to trigger something in Sean. He whirled around, his eyes unfocused and wild. "You did that on purpose," he growled, making noise, drawing attention. Just like Rebecca at the construction site, always making sure everyone was watching her. "I didn't mean," Sarah began, but Sean was already moving. He grabbed her arm with brutal force, dragging her toward the stairs. "Time you learned the same lesson Rebecca never did." "Please," Sarah sobbed. "You're hurting me." "Hurting you?" Sean laughed, a horrible, broken sound. "You don't know what hurt is. But you will. Oh, you will." Tommy stood paralyzed in the kitchen doorway as Sean hauled his sister upstairs. Sarah's eyes met his for a brief moment, wide, terrified, pleading. Then they disappeared around the corner. The master bedroom door slammed. A lock clicked, the sound of leather being pulled through belt loops. Sarah's first scream pierced the air. Tommy's legs gave out, and he slid down the wall to the floor. His heart thundered in his chest as more screams followed, punctuated by the crack of leather against flesh and Sean's drunken shouting. "Think you're better than me? Think you can look down on me like she did?" Crack. 14 years I watched her prance around that office. Crack. Should have taught her this lesson back then. Something shattered, probably the bedside lamp. Sarah's screams had turned to whimpers. Tommy pushed himself to his feet, stumbling to the kitchen phone. His hand hovered over the numbers as Sean's threats from the past echoed in his mind. "If you ever tell anyone, I'll kill your mother first. Make you both watch." Another scream from upstairs, this one weaker than the others. Tommy thought of the photograph in his comic book, of Rebecca's scratched-out face. He thought of Sarah's bruises, multiplying like dark flowers across her skin. He thought of his mother, working herself to exhaustion to support a monster. His trembling finger pressed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Tommy's voice came out as a whisper. "Please help. My stepfather is hurting my sister. I can hear her screaming. Please hurry. What's your address, sweetheart?" 247 Maple Street. Please come quickly. I think he's killing her." The operator kept him on the line, her voice calm and steady as she assured him help was coming. But to Tommy, the 3 minutes and 40 seconds it took for the first sirens to wail in the distance felt like an eternity of helpless agony. He didn't know it then, but his small act of courage would ripple outward, changing not only his family's fate but sending waves through the entire community. In the years to come, people would talk about the twin boy who finally broke the silence, who found the strength to speak when all the adults in his life had failed. But in that moment, crouched behind the kitchen counter with the phone pressed to his ear, Tommy Hoover was just a terrified 8-year-old boy, praying that help would arrive before the screams stopped completely. "Bridgeport Police. Open the door." The command thundered through the house, cutting through Sarah's whimpers and Sean's drunken raging. Tommy flew to the front door, fumbling with the locks with shaking hands. 3 officers burst in, their boots thundering on the hardwood floors. The lead officer, a tall woman with steel-gray hair, knelt before Tommy. Her name tag read Sergeant Martinez. "Where are they, sweetheart?" "Master bedroom," Tommy choked out. "Upstairs, end of the hall." He locked the door. "Stay down here with Officer Chan," she ordered, drawing her weapon as she and her partner took the stairs 2 at a time. "Police, open this door now." Silence fell for a moment. Then Sean's voice, suddenly sober with fear. "This is my house. You can't." "Break it down," Sergeant Martinez ordered. The door splintered under the force of a metal battering ram. What followed would haunt Tommy's nightmares for years to come. Sarah's broken sobbing. Sean's roar of rage. The sounds of a struggle. "He's got a knife. Drop it. Drop it now." A single gunshot. More shouting. The clinking of handcuffs. Officer Chun tried to keep Tommy in the living room, but he slipped past her when they brought Sean down. His stepfather's face was pressed against the wall, hands cuffed behind his back, blood streaming from where he'd hit the doorframe during the struggle. "You little bastard," Sean spat when he saw Tommy. "You did this. I'll kill you for this. I'll kill all of—" "Shut up," Sergeant Martinez growled, roughly steering him toward the door. "You have the right to remain silent. Use it." Tommy barely heard Sean's continuing threats as he raced upstairs. 2 paramedics were already working on Sarah, their voices calm and professional as they cataloged her injuries. Multiple lacerations from what appears to be a belt, defensive wounds on the arms, possible fractured ribs, evidence of prior injuries in various stages of healing. Sarah lay curled on her side, her school clothes in tatters, angry welts crisscrossing her back. But she was conscious, her eyes finding Tommy's as he approached. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." Tommy took her hand, the one without the 4 the paramedics had just inserted. "I had to, Sarah. I couldn't let him hurt you anymore." "Mrs. Hoover has been notified," Officer Chun said from the doorway. "She's meeting us at Bridgeport General." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Police photographers documented Sarah's injuries and the state of the room. Evidence technicians bagged Sean's belt, Sarah's torn clothing, and the knife he'd pulled when police entered. A kitchen knife he must have had hidden in the bedroom. Tommy answered questions in a daze. How long had the abuse been going on? When did it start? Had Sean ever hurt him too? Did their mother know? "She works so much," Tommy explained, his voice small. "She didn't see. She was always so tired." Finally, they were ready to transport Sarah. As the paramedics wheeled her out on a stretcher, Sergeant Martinez paused to look around the bedroom one last time. Her eyes fell on something under the dresser, a photograph that had fallen during the struggle. She picked it up, studying the scratched-out face of Rebecca Stevens. "He used to follow her," Tommy said quietly, "before he met our mom. Sarah looks like her. That's why he hated her so much." The sergeant's face darkened as she bagged the photo as evidence. "You did the right thing, Tommy. You know that, right? You saved your sister's life today." Tommy watched from the ambulance as police cars filled their quiet street. Neighbors stood on porches, recording with phones, whispering behind hands. Sean sat in the back of a police car, still ranting, his words muffled by closed windows. As they pulled away, sirens wailing, Tommy held his sister's hand and finally let his tears fall. He cried for every bruise he'd seen and said nothing about, for every scream he'd pretended not to hear, for their mother, who would soon face her own devastating revelations. But beneath the tears was something else. Relief. The monstrous secret that had lived in their house was finally exposed to the light. Sean's power over them was broken. That Sunday afternoon, as autumn leaves swirled around the emergency vehicles on Maple Street, the long nightmare of the Hoover twins began its slow journey toward an end. And though they didn't know it yet, somewhere in the city, a woman named Rebecca Stevens was about to receive a phone call that would bring her own long-buried fears rushing back to the surface. The truth, so long confined to whispers and shadows, was finally screaming its way into the light. The emergency room of Bridgeport General Hospital had never felt so different to Claire Hoover. For years, she'd walked these halls as a nurse, confident in her ability to help others through their worst moments. Now, she stood frozen in the doorway of Treatment Room 3, watching strangers tend to her daughter's wounds. Multiple contusions and lacerations, Dr. Reynolds was saying, his voice professional but gentle. 3 cracked ribs, evidence of prior injuries. The words washed over Claire like ice water. Each clinical term translated in her mind to moments of violence she should have seen, should have stopped. Sarah lay on her stomach as a nurse photographed the welts on her back. Her small face turned away from the door, away from her mother. Mrs. Hoover, Sergeant Martinez touched her elbow. We need to talk about what happens next. In the family consultation room, Tommy sat clutched against Claire's side as the police sergeant laid out the brutal truth. Sean's history of stalking Rebecca Stevens, the escalating abuse, the photographs in the basement, the journal detailing his obsession. He's been charged with aggravated assault, child abuse, false imprisonment, and attempted murder, Martinez explained. Given his prior record? Claire's voice cracked. There was a restraining order from Rebecca Stevens back in 2003. He violated it multiple times. Claire pressed her hand to her mouth, remembering how she'd met Sean. Not a workplace accident, she now realized. He'd been hanging around the hospital, knowing Rebecca Stevens' father was being treated there for cancer. I didn't know, she whispered. Oh God. I didn't know. Mom. Tommy's voice was small. Are you mad at me? For calling the police? Claire pulled her son closer, her tears falling into his hair. No, baby. You're so brave. You saved your sister. I'm the one who... She couldn't finish. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of police statements, social workers, and medical examinations. Sarah remained withdrawn, speaking only in whispers, flinching at sudden movements. Tommy rarely left her side, as if afraid she might disappear if he looked away. Claire took emergency family leave from work, her colleagues rallying to cover her shifts. The support was overwhelming. Cards, meals, offers of help. But at night, alone in her hospital chair watching Sarah sleep, Claire faced the crushing weight of her failure. She'd worked so hard to provide for her children that she'd become blind to their suffering. Every extra shift, every double, every time she'd collapsed into bed too exhausted to really look at them, all of it had given Sean more opportunities to hurt her daughter. On the third day, as Claire was signing Sarah's discharge papers, a woman appeared in the doorway. Tall, elegant, with long dark hair showing traces of gray. Claire recognized her instantly from the photographs. Rebecca Stevens. I came as soon as I heard, Rebecca said softly. I thought you should know what happened, what he did, what I should have done differently. Sarah, who hadn't spoken above a whisper in days, suddenly sat up straighter in her wheelchair. You're her, she said. The one who got away. Rebecca crossed the room slowly, kneeling before Sarah. The resemblance between them was startling. The same delicate features, the same haunted look in their eyes. I'm so sorry, Rebecca's voice broke. I should have pressed charges back then. Should have made sure he went to jail. If I had... It's not your fault, Tommy said fiercely. It's his. All of it. Rebecca looked at the young boy with something like wonder. You're the one who called the police? You did what I never had the courage to do. Later that night, in the small apartment the hospital's victim advocacy program had arranged for them, Claire held her children as they slept. Sarah's back was still too tender for hugs, but she let her mother stroke her hair, something she hadn't allowed in months. Tommy stirred. Mom? Is he going to come back? No, baby. Never. Promise. But how can you be sure? Claire thought of Sean in his holding cell, of Rebecca Stevens' testimony joining theirs, of the evidence collected from their house. Because this time we're all telling the truth. And the truth is stronger than his lies. As her children drifted back to sleep, Claire stared out the apartment window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, other children were suffering in silence. Other mothers were working themselves to exhaustion, missing the signs. Other monsters were hiding behind masks of charm and need. But tomorrow, Claire would start speaking at domestic violence support groups. She would tell their story, help others recognize the signs she had missed. And maybe, just maybe, another child would find the courage to make that call before it was too late. The healing would take time. Trust, once shattered, doesn't mend easily. But as Claire held her sleeping children, she made a silent vow. They would never again mistake survival for love. They would never again let silence protect a monster. They would learn to live without fear one day at a time. The children's wing of Bridgeport Family Services was painted in cheerful yellows and blues, with cartoon animals dancing across the walls. In her fourth therapy session, Sarah Hoover sat cross-legged on a beanbag chair, her fingers methodically braiding and unbraiding a strand of her hair. Dr. Melissa Chen, a child psychologist specializing in trauma, watched the repetitive movement. "You're wearing your hair down today," she observed gently. Sarah's hands froze mid-braid. "Mom said I could," she said. Her voice trembled. "She said I never have to wear it up again if I don't want to." "How does that feel?" "Scary," Sarah whispered. "Sometimes I still hear his voice, telling me to tie it back. Sometimes I wake up and forget he's gone. And I run to the bathroom to fix it before he sees." In the adjacent room, Tommy was having his own session with Dr. Roberts. Unlike his sister, he spoke freely, anger and guilt pouring out in equal measure. "I should have called sooner," he said, pacing the small room. "The first time I saw a bruise, the first time I heard her cry, I should have done something." "You did do something," Dr. Roberts reminded him. "You saved her life. But what if I'd waited too long? What if he'd—" Tommy couldn't finish the sentence. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. Sean had been denied bail due to the severity of the charges and his history of stalking. Rebecca Stevens had provided additional evidence: emails, photos, diary entries documenting years of harassment. Claire attended her own therapy sessions, learning to navigate her guilt and grief. She'd found a support group for mothers of abused children, where she could finally voice the shame that kept her awake at night. "I thought I was protecting them," she told the group, twisting a tissue in her hands. "Working all those hours, making sure they had food and clothes and a roof. But I was just absent. I made them vulnerable." Maria, another mother in the group, reached for her hand. "We do what we think is right at the time. The important thing is what we do after we know better." The twins' nightmares continued, but they were changing. Sarah no longer dreamed of being trapped in that bedroom. Instead, she dreamed of running, of flying, of her hair streaming behind her like a banner of freedom. Tommy's dreams still featured monsters, but now he faced them, fought them, won. 1 month after the arrest, the district attorney met with the family to prepare for trial. Sarah would need to testify. Tommy had already given a detailed statement, his clear, child's voice recorded as he described every incident he'd witnessed. "You don't have to look at him," the DA explained to Sarah. "Just look at me, or at your mom, or at Tommy. Tell your truth. That's all you need to do." That evening, Claire found her children in Sarah's new room in their apartment. Tommy was reading aloud from his Captain America comic while Sarah drew in her therapy journal. Looking at them, Claire saw something she'd missed before: their resilience. Sarah's drawings had evolved from dark scribbles to bright scenes of freedom: birds in flight, open doors, sunrises. Tommy had started a peer support group at school for kids dealing with family problems. They were healing, not just surviving. "Mom," Sarah looked up from her drawing. "Can we get a cat?" The question, so normal, so childlike, brought tears to Claire's eyes. "Of course, baby. We can go to the shelter this weekend." "I want a black one," Tommy declared. "Like a ninja guard cat." Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "As long as it's not mean. I don't want any more mean things in our life." Claire sat with her children, watching as they debated cat names and personalities. The weight of the upcoming trial still loomed, but here, in this moment, she saw their future taking shape. Not defined by what they'd survived, but by what they would become. Later that night, as Claire tucked them in, Sarah asked the question she'd been holding back. What if he gets out someday? Then we'll face it together, Claire promised. But right now, he's where he belongs. And we're where we belong. Together, Tommy reached across the space between their beds, holding out his hand. Sarah took it, their linked fingers forming a bridge in the darkness. Together, they echoed. And in that word, Claire heard not just unity, but strength. Not just survival, but triumph. They were learning that healing, like harm, leaves its marks. But unlike the scars Sean had left, these marks made them stronger, wiser, more compassionate. They were becoming not just survivors, but warriors for truth. And in their healing, they would help others find their voice, their courage, their way back to light. The Bridgeport County Courthouse loomed before them, its stone facade cold and imposing in the November morning light. Sarah clutched her mother's hand as they climbed the steps, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. Tommy walked on her other side, his Captain America figure secretly tucked in his pocket for courage. Inside courtroom 3B, Sean Walsh sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, his face gaunt from 3 months in county jail. When Sarah entered, his head snapped up, eyes fixing on her hair with that familiar look of obsessive rage. Tommy stepped closer to his sister, shielding her from their stepfather's gaze. District Attorney Margaret Sean stood to deliver her opening statement, her voice steady and clear. Your Honor, members of the jury. This case is about a man who turned his home into a prison of terror. A man who transferred his obsession with one woman onto an 8-year-old child. A man who believed he could hide his crimes behind closed doors and a mother's exhaustion. The evidence mounted over 3 days. Photographs of Sarah's injuries, both recent and healed. Tommy's 911 call. His young voice trembling but determined. The basement collection of Rebecca Stevens' photos. Sean's journal, filled with rage and obsession. Rebecca Stevens took the stand first, her testimony laying the groundwork for Sean's pattern of fixation and violence. Started with small things, she explained. Showing up where I worked, leaving notes on my car. When I got engaged, it escalated. He would follow me home, send threatening letters. Even after I moved away, changed jobs. He found ways to stay connected to my life. Claire testified about her long hours at the hospital, her voice breaking as she described finding old report cards where Sarah's declining grades tracked perfectly with Sean's escalating abuse. She went from a student to barely passing, Claire whispered. I thought it was just adjustment issues, normal stepfamily problems. I was so blind. On the 3rd day, Sarah took the stand. She looked tiny in the witness box, but her voice carried clearly through the hushed courtroom. He said I was just like her, that I looked at him the same way, that I thought I was better than him. Sometimes he'd make me stand in front of the mirror while he pointed out all the ways I looked like Rebecca. Then she faltered. Take your time, DHN said gently. Sarah's eyes found Tommy in the gallery. He gave her a slight nod, and she continued. He'd hit me. With his belt, his hands, whatever was nearby. He said he was teaching me a lesson Rebecca never learned. That I needed to learn my place. Sean's lawyer tried to suggest Sarah was exaggerating. That the injuries were from normal childhood accidents. But the medical evidence was irrefutable. Dr. Reynolds testified about the layered trauma, the defensive wounds, the systematic nature of the abuse. Tommy was the final witness. He described the months of watching helplessly as his sister changed from a happy, outgoing child to a frightened shadow. He spoke about finding the photograph, about connecting Sean's obsession with Rebecca to his treatment of Sarah. On that last day, Tommy said, his voice strong despite his tears, I knew if I didn't call for help, Sarah might die. He was so angry, so drunk. I could hear her screaming, and I thought about all the times I'd been too scared to call. I couldn't be scared anymore. During closing arguments, Sean's lawyer tried to paint him as a troubled man who needed help, not punishment. Dae-chun stood for her rebuttal, her voice vibrating with controlled anger. The defense would have you believe Mr. Walsh is the victim of his obsessions. But obsession didn't force him to raise his hand to a child. Addiction didn't make him systematically torture his stepdaughter. Mental illness didn't compel him to target a little girl for her resemblance to a woman who rejected him. Those were choices. Deliberate, cruel choices made by a man who believed he had the right to destroy a child's life to soothe his wounded ego. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. As the forewoman stood to deliver the verdict, Sarah gripped Tommy's hand. On the charge of aggravated child abuse in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The list continued. Attempted murder, false imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon. Guilty on all counts. Sean exploded from his chair, having to be restrained by court officers as he shouted, "She deserved it. They all deserve it. You can't." His voice cut off as they dragged him from the courtroom. Sarah didn't flinch at his outburst. Instead, she stood straighter, her free hand reaching for her hair, not to tie it back, but to let it fall more freely around her face. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered with their cameras and microphones. But Claire led her children out a side door, where Rebecca Stevens waited with her car. "Ice cream," she suggested. "I know a place." As they drove away from the courthouse, Tommy watched his sister in the back seat. She was looking out the window, one hand playing with her loose hair, the other still holding his. On her face was something he hadn't seen in a long time: peace. Sean Walsh would be sentenced to 30 years without possibility of parole. But for the Hoover twins, the true sentence, their imprisonment in fear, had already ended. They were free, and they had earned their freedom in the currency of truth and courage. The truth had finally won. In their new apartment across town, sunlight streamed through windows that had never known Sean's shadow. Sarah stood in front of her bedroom mirror, carefully pinning a small rainbow butterfly clip in her freely flowing hair. "Ready for your big day?" Tommy asked from the doorway. Today marked Sarah's first public speaking engagement at the Bridgeport Children's Advocacy Center. At 9 years old, she had decided to share her story with other children trapped in situations like hers had been. "What if I mess up?" she whispered, fingers nervously tracing the butterfly's wings. "You won't," Tommy assured her. "But even if you do, it doesn't matter. Just being there matters." Their lives had changed dramatically in the 5 months since Sean's sentencing. Claire had switched to day shifts in pediatrics, taking a small pay cut but gaining precious time with her children. Their new apartment, though smaller than their old house, felt larger somehow, filled with light and the sounds of their rescue cat, Ninja, chasing toys down the hallway. The changes went deeper than their living situation. Sarah had started taking karate classes, her instructor carefully working around her lingering anxiety about being touched. Tommy had joined the school newspaper, writing a column about standing up to bullying. Both twins were seeing their grades improve, their nightmares growing less frequent. "Mom, we're going to be late," Sarah called out, smoothing her favorite blue dress, a gift from Rebecca, who had become a steady presence in their lives. Claire appeared in the doorway, adjusting her nurse's badge. "Just got off shift. Give me 5 minutes to change." At the advocacy center, Sarah faced a room of social workers, counselors, and children like herself, survivors looking for hope. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. "I used to think being brave meant not being scared, but that's not true. Being brave means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. My brother taught me that." Tommy watched from the back of the room, pride swelling in his chest. His sister wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The same strength that had helped her endure was now helping her heal. After the speech, a small girl approached Sarah, her own hair pulled back so tightly it must have hurt. Without a word, Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a spare butterfly clip, offering it with a gentle smile. The changes rippled outward beyond their family. Claire had started a support group for working mothers, helping them recognize warning signs she had missed. Tommy's peer support group at school had grown to include kids from other grades. Even Rebecca Stevens had found healing in helping them, finally facing her own long-buried trauma. That evening, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream in their small living room. Ninja curled up between the twins on the couch, purring contentedly. "I have something to show you," Claire said, pulling out a letter. The hospital is starting a new program for families affected by domestic violence. They want me to help coordinate it. Like a superhero team? Tommy asked, grinning. Something like that, Claire laughed. Using our experience to help others. Sarah leaned against her mother's shoulder, playing with her butterfly clip. Does it ever go away completely? She asked quietly. The scary feelings? Claire stroked her daughter's hair. I don't think they go away completely, but they get smaller, less powerful. And we get stronger. Like my karate teacher says, Sarah nodded. Turn your scars into strength. Tommy reached for his sister's hand. Their childhood gesture of comfort now transformed into one of shared victory. We already did, he said. Look at us now. Through the window, the spring sunset painted their small living room in shades of gold. Ninja stretched and changed positions, demanding pets from both twins. Claire watched her children. Not just survivors now, but warriors for change, each in their own way. They had learned that healing wasn't a destination but a journey. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to choose courage over fear, hope over despair. Their story, once a tragedy of abuse and silence, had become a testament to resilience and the power of speaking truth. As night fell over Bridgeport, the Hoover family sat together in their circle of light, planning tomorrow's adventures. They were no longer defined by what had been done to them, but by what they had chosen to become: survivors, advocates, heroes of their own story. And somewhere in the city, other children would sleep easier tonight, knowing that someone understood, someone had survived, someone was fighting for them. The butterfly effect of courage had only just begun. The autumn sunlight painted Bridgeport streets in shades of amber and gold, so different from the gray morning a year ago when Tommy Hoover had made the call that changed everything. Today, the twins sat in the front row of the Bridgeport Police Department's annual Community Awards ceremony. Sarah wore a blue dress with silver butterflies embroidered along the hem, her dark hair falling in natural waves around her shoulders. Tommy fidgeted with his tie, the weight of his Captain America figure still faithful in his pocket. For extraordinary courage in the face of danger, Chief Anderson read from the podium, and for actions that exemplify the highest ideals of civic duty, we present this year's Civilian Bravery Award to Thomas Hoover. The applause thundered through the auditorium as Tommy walked up to receive his plaque. In the audience, he could see familiar faces. Sergeant Martinez, beaming with pride. Dr. Chan and Dr. Roberts from Family Services. Rebecca Stevens, her own eyes bright with tears, and most importantly, his mother and sister, holding hands and smiling. Tommy, Chief Anderson said, lowering the microphone, would you like to say a few words? Tommy hadn't prepared a speech, but as he looked out at the crowd, he knew exactly what he needed to say. A year ago, I was just a scared kid who didn't know what to do. I thought heroes had to be big and strong like in the comics. But I learned that sometimes being a hero just means telling the truth, even when you're terrified. Sometimes it means making one phone call. His voice grew stronger as he continued. But I'm not the real hero of this story. My sister Sarah is. She survived things no one should have to survive, and now she helps other kids find their courage. My mom is a hero too, working with families to recognize the signs she missed. And every person out there who's living in fear right now, you can be a hero too. Just reach out. Make the call. Tell your truth. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium when he finished. Later that evening, the Hoover family gathered in their apartment for what had become a weekly tradition: breakfast for dinner. Claire had mastered the art of heart-shaped pancakes, and the twins competed to create the most elaborate toppings combinations. Ninja prowled the kitchen, hoping for dropped bits of bacon. The walls, once bare, now held framed photographs of happy moments from the past year. Sarah's first karate tournament, Tommy's school newspaper award, Claire's graduation from the victim advocacy training program. I got a letter from prison today, Claire said quietly, once the dinner dishes were cleared. Sean's appealing his conviction. A year ago, this news would have sent waves of panic through the family. But tonight, Sarah just reached for her brother's hand and said, "Let him. The truth is stronger than his lies. Remember?" Tommy squeezed back. "Always, They had learned that healing wasn't a straight line. There were still nights when Sarah woke up screaming, days when Tommy blamed himself for not acting sooner, moments when Claire's guilt threatened to overwhelm her. But they had also learned that they were stronger together, that every setback was temporary, that love could rebuild what hatred had tried to destroy. As the evening wound down, Sarah sat at her desk, writing in her journal. Not the therapy journal anymore, but a new one, filled with stories of hope she planned to share. Tommy sprawled on her floor, reading comics and occasionally offering plot suggestions. Claire watched from the doorway, her heart full. They had survived the darkest chapter of their story. But survival, they had discovered, was just the beginning. What came after, the healing, the growing, the helping others find their voice, that was the real victory. A soft autumn breeze rustled through the open window, carrying with it the sounds of the city. Traffic and distant sirens, children playing, life moving forward. In their small corner of Bridgeport, the Hoover family had built something Sean could never destroy. A future crafted from truth, strengthened by love, and illuminated by the courage of a little boy who dared to make a call. And somewhere out there, another child might be gathering that same courage, reaching for a phone, preparing to tell their truth. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.